endless opportunities to be creative, flex operational muscles, and more importantly, work with a really scrappy group of people who are less focused on here's the way we've always done it and here's the politics of this to how do we get this done and how do we get it done well. They're literally functional things that you can't wrap your brain around, and you have to figure out a path forward. And in doing so, you have to get into this growth mindset that allows you to pick apart the things that you can control, the things you can influence, the things you let go, and most importantly, the things you can learn from. Because frankly, all of us are just on a giant learning journey, and you've got to have a sense of humor because otherwise, you're going to get exhausted. Stay true to who you are. It is the only capital you have.
And we're recording. Christi Geary, how are things in New Jersey?
They are ridiculously hot at the moment. We are under a heat wave, but other than that, pretty spectacular. How are you, Victor?
Toronto is the same way as well. Sometimes you'll see the forecast 3 or 4 days in advance and you just want to call bull. Because like, let's face it, here's something for you from one marketer to another, one media person to another. The most unaccountable people in our industry are meteorologists. Like, think about it. Like, let's say they come to you and they're like, "Oh, Christy, it's just gonna be hail all weekend and a storm." They get it wrong, they don't lose their job, but if they get it wrong, you're also happy. You're like, "Oh, I want these guys to fail more when it comes to this." So, it kinda crept up on us up here. Did it do the same in New Jersey where you're just like,
And us. The other part that always happens is we have 4 days of blistering heat out of nowhere, and Thursday we drop almost 40 to 50 degrees to have a high of more like 60, which is okay, no problem. I prefer it in that space. Although I'll tell you on the unaccountability thing, I don't disagree with you from a meteorologist standpoint, but I believe there are others who would try to compete for that particular prize.
yeah, absolutely. And now it's like you're blaming your phone. Like no one's sitting in front of the TV. No disrespect to the Weather Channel, the Weather Network, but it's
Exactly.
like your phone's telling you. But look, we got a lot to talk about today. So I'm glad we were able to connect. Okay, so let's start first with where you are right now. So let me know if I've got this title correct because this is a heck of a title. You're the head general manager and the executive vice president of agency Advantage Solutions at AMP Agency. So tell us about AMP and like what your opulent role there entails.
So I'll make it a little easier. I
Okay.
am essentially the president and head of AMP Agency. Because our parent company is Advantage Solutions, I am also an EVP at Advantage Solutions.
Okay.
The most important part of that is that for all intents and purposes, I lead the AMP Agency in that regard.
Those are a lot of hats to juggle.
It's a lot of hats to juggle. I have to tell you, the one that's the hardest one is being mom of two
Uh,
teenage girls at home. But yeah, it gives you a lot of practice for what happens at work. So AMP is taking up a good portion of my time, especially over the last 2 years. But it has been a nonstop adventure with an extraordinary group of people.
well, we're going to get into that adventure later on and just the adventure that is your life. So as always, we start from the beginning. And I got to tell you, as I was doing my research and your team sent over the notes that you were from St. Louis, I could not do any more work without country grammar from Nelly in my head. I'm not joking.
I totally get it. I appreciate it. I support it. Born and raised, I've had heard every version of that, along with the complete utter debate on provolone cheese-based pizza and toasted ravioli. So there, we could go any number of ways in talking about St. Louis.
You're talking about a big provolone fan right here who puts provolone on his pizza, and I bake pizzas regularly. They're a little bit nugget about myself. So wait, why is there a debate about that? Shouldn't even be a debate.
I totally agree. We need to hang out more often, and you and I can go
Yes.
on our own sort of like, this is what needs to be true in the future of life in general. So there is a pizza chain in St. Louis that's been there for as long as I can remember. And it's one of those where if you're from there, you love it. If you're not from there, you think everyone who's from there is absolutely insane. They use a type of cheese combo called Provel, which is a mix of, wait for it, provolone and some cheddar, which tends to cause New York and Chicago pizza aficionados to freak out because of the cheddar component. But it's fairly delicious and worth a shot if you're willing to give it a shot.
I think I'm from St. Louis, or at least in a previous life, because I put a sharp cheddar on my pizza. I find that it balances out the tomato sauce recipe. But
I think you might be a hidden St. Louis person. I think you might be.
I'm a closeted Cardinals fan, I guess. We'll see.
Oh, well, that's a whole different problem. I still am, but wow, is that painful.
Actually, what I feel for when it comes to people from St. Louis, the fact that you just keep getting football teams taken away from you.
Football teams and hockey teams at one point, we were the sports city, growing up, and then all of a sudden, let's just take it as an egotistical moment. I left and all the sports teams disappeared.
You know what? I see the correlation there. That's what happens. They're just like, Christie's gone, so are we. Bring on LA or
That's
San
fair.
or
In the
Phoenix.
Northeast,
Yeah.
I have too many now. Now I have to choose, and people get into heavy debates in the Northeast.
It does get very territorial when you're within that makeup. So, okay. So what was life like growing up in St. Louis?
Say I had a absolutely fabulous upbringing. You mentioned 80s in our pre-countdown,
Mhm.
and I was a child of the 80s, which means that life was fabulous and ridiculous in terms of clothes, hair, earrings, you name it.
Movies
Uh,
were a big deal, toys were grand, like, everything was
Movies, music, you got outside. You didn't have a world that was consuming your creativity in ways
mhm.
other than how far could you come up with a new game while you were outside. So I had an amazing childhood. St. Louis was a big part of that. My family was extraordinary. We're very, very busy. I was a competitive swimmer, so that took an extraordinary amount of time. And huge shout out and thank you to my parents again, because the amount of driving back and forth and sitting in really uncomfortable stands and in hot weather cannot be appreciated enough. But it was pretty fantastic. And St. Louis itself went through such a evolution over the time that I was a kid to when I went to school to where it is now. It's been very interesting to watch everything from politics to social to educational components change within the city, and it's been happy and sad in terms of watching some of what's happened, but mostly just a lot of appreciation for the childhood that I did have.
Okay, so let's talk about that childhood a little bit and your hobbies and interests. Let's start with swimming. You've already brought it up, and so you were a competitive swimmer. Like we're not talking like regular swimming lessons. Like you mentioned, your parents were shelling it out in the really uncomfortable stands, but I imagine there were a lot of early mornings and late afternoons as well.
5 a.m. practice
Hmm.
and 7 p.m. swim practice till after 9 at night, plus weightlifting and running before that. Yep, swam competitively up through college until I managed to blow out my shoulders because I am not actually physically the right size to be the level of swimmer I was aspiring to be. I am relatively short. I'm about 5'2", which means I made up for everything with frequency and enthusiasm, which is fantastic until you get a little older, then your shoulders go, sorry, not so much for you.
If you say your shoulders were going, I'm going to guess your event was fly or backstroke.
So interesting. You would think so. I was
Yeah.
a sprint freestyler, breaststroker, and IMer. But again, I made up frequency of stroke as opposed to actually making sure that I was taking care for the best possible technical stroke.
Do you think swimming set you up for success in terms of discipline? Let me preface that by saying that the high school I went to had a pool and it had a program for Olympic hopefuls or those that were looking to carry on into university. And you just saw what they went through. And every once in a while, as a lifeguard, and we'll touch on that after, I would guard some of those swims, like you said, like before the sun comes up. And it was incredible how they were literally up at the crack of dawn swimming, then making sure they got showered and changed and they were in class, homework. And two, you brought up the land training. That doesn't come up a lot in swimming. Like a lot of people don't realize that there is a heavy component in the weight room. And I imagine you were doing a lot of running as well too for your endurance.
Well, we were definitely at the time. It was a lot of core. Interestingly enough, at one point, my coach really got into the meditation and the mental
Really?
stuff in swimming as well, which was really fantastic. I mean, I swam competitively up through college until my shoulders went out. So yes, those early mornings. But to get back to kind of your push on that, 100%. I think swimming played an unbelievable role in driving discipline, perseverance. It is rare for me to run across something where I'm like, I won't be able to figure out the time to do that, or this is worse than a 4 a.m. ice cold practice outside.
Oh
Um,
god, yeah.
Rare.
Yeah, those I've had to deal with that cold water, not at that level, but teaching swimming lessons, but, like, your kid throws up on you, cold water, you gotta keep your composure together with the parents watching in the stands. One of your other interests, how did you discover drawing and painting?
Well, so drawing and painting was purely what I like to do. So even now, when I need to give my brain a moment to focus and take a break from the insanity that happens every single day, coloring. So the smell of crayons,
Ah, okay.
but the smell of crayons is an instant calm down component, brings you back to a safe space. So coloring is where it started, and that leaned into, oh, I could actually do this. Okay, it was never going to sell my art or be successful in that realm, um, but as far as an opportunity to allow your brain to think differently and to be more creative in that outlet, it's one of my favorite things to do. I don't get to do enough of it as much as I would like to right now, but we'll get back to it eventually.
When you smell crayon wax, does it just spark up nostalgia for you? Like, do you go
100%.
back to oh, I know.
100%. My kids will still in holiday stocking stuffers, they will still buy me crayons every year.
Now, are they getting you the big packs that had, like, that sharp remember that growing up? They
That
had the
was my
sharpener and
favorite.
everything?
That's my
Yep.
favorite, but those tended to end up being a problem after a while. You loved those, you wanted those, you got them, but then if you actually used the crayons, at some point, one would break or it would be all the way down at the
Mm.
you couldn't get the box to close anymore, and then it didn't look good anymore, and you decided you didn't want it. It's a very American mentality on that.
Actually, now that you think about it, it's a great way of, like, I guess if you're a parent looking at that and going, "What colors do your kids like?" It's kind
There
of
you
like a
go.
bit of a clue into, like, what they're interested in. Because if, like, you've got, let's say, gray. I think that was, like, the least used color I had. It was just like, "What am I coloring with gray?" Let's talk about some of your influences. So, the first one you credit is your parents. Why them?
Well, in general, I was lucky enough to have 2 outstanding parents. They were both dual working parents. So from a very young age, I just was already in this space where you work hard, you do all these different pieces. Not to say that if you aren't dual working parents, you aren't working
Mm.
hard. I was used to that 9 to 5 plus of how that generated time, energy, and somehow they always made time for all of my activities, whatever I needed in that capacity. I'm sure I did not convey to them in the moment of teenage madness that they were primary role models and as amazing as they are, but I have done my best since then to make sure that they understand my appreciation. And certainly once you become a parent yourself, you have a much better appreciation for what you either put your parents through or what they have done on your behalf. So my parents just always were this kind of balance of practicality, always there, and sense of humor, and with a super big focus on kind of your core family as this, I won't use the word village to describe that place, but kind of just the reassurance and the support that was always going to be there and that has never strayed from the fact. So they were definitely the first and foremost. There have been others, for sure, but they were extraordinary, and I am hugely appreciative of them.
What about your teachers and your coaches?
There are magical teachers in my history. My kindergarten teacher, not my kindergarten teacher, actually. My fourth grade teacher and my first grade teacher were two of my favorite teachers. They were life changing in the impact they had on me. They were storytellers, they were magic makers. They could allow you to be yourselves
Mm.
and for that intensely. And they rewarded you for being yourself. And they showed you that it was safe to do so and that you could be successful in being yourself. They were extraordinary. I had a handful of really amazing high school teachers and college professors who taught me very specific components along the way. And I had a wide variety of coaches throughout my life. And while there were definitely some extraordinary ones in there, I think I actually learned the most from the ones that were the most challenging because I learned what behavior I didn't want to exemplify. I didn't want to use in my own leadership or efforts with other people around me, or what did work to motivate people and how you had to change that based on the situation or the individual. So it's kind of a mixed bag, but I've found over the course of a lifetime that you learn just as much from the people who you don't sync with as much as you do from the people that kind of reinforce what you already thought.
That last part there, is that something that you've realized in hindsight, or was that something that you learned as you were going through those relationships? Because it's very easy when you're young to think, "I disagree with this person, and I'm just gonna disregard whatever they say." Like, it's hard to have that lesson.
It is hard to have the lesson. I think I learned it pretty early from a variety of different areas, but I don't believe I was able to articulate it and put it to use until probably my late 20s, early 30s. And
Mm.
that really came about when you start to have managers and or different work environments where you find that it is not just about disagreeing. There are literally functional things that you can't wrap your brain around, and you have to figure out a path forward. And in doing so, you have to get into this growth mindset that allows you to pick apart the things that you can control, the things you can influence, the things you let go, and most importantly, the things you can learn from. Because frankly, all of us are just on a giant learning journey, and you've got to have a sense of humor because otherwise, you're going to get exhausted.
Yes, you need to have a especially in this industry. Everyone on
Yes,
the outside thinks it's like an episode of Mad Men, and I'm just like, there's
yeah.
madness, but it's not quite like that.
It's not quite like that, although there are days where I think there's a moment where you're like, "Yeah, okay, feels like an episode of Mad Men." But less about that and more just about the relentless pace of change, and personalities. That's really what marketing is.
Completely agree with that. I ask all of my guests about their very first job ever. Always goes back to part-time work in their teenage years. You gave me an eclectic mix. So
I
let's start first with babysitting.
Yeah, so I absolutely adore kids. They are the unfiltered insight into what the universe should be, as far as all of us should get along and behave, even the ones who need a few lessons in not being little bullies, but that's okay. Kids, for the most part, are absolutely extraordinary. And so I, from a very young age, um, really got to know my neighbors who had new kids, everything else. And it became a very wonderful relationship where I was able to watch the kids for them while my parents were still home, even though I was probably too young to be 100% babysitting at that point. But because my parents were always there on call, it wasn't a big deal. And that developed in just to a just kind of lifelong appreciation of kids and the joy that they bring. And again, more importantly, the insight they bring. But that was just kind of an ongoing component, similar to lifeguarding on the rest. The first real job, and man, was that a story, was provided by my real job when I say I had to actually file for taxes and so
Mm.
on and so forth, was provided by my ninth grade, high school gym and health teacher. He had this side gig in in the summer, where he would run a fireworks stand. I mean, one of those ones on the side of the road where you have everything
Geez, okay.
small firecrackers to we're going to explode the entire tent and no one's making it up opportunities to partake. And he would hire the high school kids to come in and be the cashiers and the baggers and to enable it. So just like now, it was essentially about 3 weeks leading up to 4th of July, where it was about 110 degrees every day. And you worked as a cashier and a bagger at a fireworks stand. And I can tell you that reinforced my observational skills for there are a lot of very interesting people out there.
That is a very polite way of saying you had some crazy customers.
Had some crazy customers. It makes you kinda concerned slash
Because you
creative and how you think it's gonna go.
it's you just wonder if there's gonna be, like, a news story a couple hours later about something going wrong with fireworks, and if you're gonna see one of your charred customers.
There's also a small part of you that feels a little guilty that you're feels a little wrong that I'm selling explosives to this particular individual. But hey, learned a lot, learned how to do math really fast in my head, learned how to deal with customer service and a lot of different people, and had an extraordinary bonding experience with the rest of us who were there. And when the 3 weeks were done and it was the night of 4th of July and it was the last night of the tent, he did the coolest thing. He bought pizza and sodas for everybody and then allowed everybody to pick as many fireworks as they wanted of what was left of the inventory and to take them home to their families. And to this day, I remember that being such a challenging but wonderful job because it ended with this camaraderie and this acknowledgement of what you were able to achieve, even though it was just being a cashier at a fireworks stand.
So, when you were sitting in that tent or cabin in the 110-degree weather, were you wishing you were in the pool, cold water, 5 in the
This
morning?
is the hard part, right? Like,
The
The
trade-offs.
grass is always greener no matter where you are. So, yes, when I was in the fireworks stand, I was wishing I was lifeguarding. When I was lifeguarding, I was wishing I was back in the fireworks stand
It goes
occasionally.
back and forth.
It's very human, right? We're never quite happy exactly where we are. But yes, all of them taught very different things and were pretty fantastic for what they were.
Okay, so let's talk about lifeguarding for a second, because this is something that you and I have in common. Just kind of like a natural progression for you because you were already a swimmer? Or was
Already a
it
swimmer, wasn't hard, didn't have to learn the skill set.
Yep.
And, it just made sense. When you were a swimmer and you were a competitive swimmer, you were a lifeguard, especially
Mm.
me.
Yeah, no, there wasn't a lot of that around when I was growing up simply because they didn't have the time to do it. Like,
Yeah,
it was just so difficult for them to do. And, yes, we were talking about this before we went live. That is the type of job that, pays better than, say, if you're working in a quick service restaurant, but it can come with a ton of grief and a ton of stories. Like, it can be the most boring job in the world, and it can be I say excitement with a star because excitement can go either way.
it definitely has an asterisk for sure. It's kind of like working in a fireworks tent. Now that I,
Yeah. You
you kind of get the same. I'm not going to call it a problem. You get the same circumstances. Yeah, lifeguarding, another really fabulous learn how to observe and handle people skill set. A fairly serious one that also seems to have a lot of levity because if I don't know, it was the same for you, but there were moments where, man, you could see it coming. Like, you knew it
Mhm.
was coming, and there was very little you could do to stop it because you were not allowed to preemptively be like, "You can't swim. Stay over there." You had to wait for the person to get in the water and start to drown, which is a terrible business model, by the way,
It is.
but the nature of being a lifeguard.
One of the rules that they had, and I really hated this, they could put on a life jacket or a PFD, hop in, and you would have kids who would just freak out because they couldn't touch the bottom of the pool all of a sudden, and then they'd be reaching for the closest person they could, and then that became a two-person problem all of a sudden.
Push them down.
Yep,
Frogger.
pushes them down. Yeah, we were also saying too that a lot of people don't realize that you spend a lot of time filling out paperwork when stuff goes wrong.
So
It's
much paperwork, so much paperwork. But, the flotation devices, though, were a thing. What I always found, especially in the outdoor summer pools, is and this is a bit of a high horse as a person where water safety is very important. Swim competitively. I think everyone, if at all
Mhm.
possible, know how to swim to be able to save their own life and or potentially someone else's. But flotation devices, I get it. I understand. I just wish more people understood that when you start and finish with flotation devices, your kids think they can swim.
Yes.
And when the flotation devices are not on, which by the way, they come off every time there's a snack or lunch or they walk away,
It's true.
they can't swim. So I have a love-hate relationship with flotation devices.
George Carlin said it the best, "Swimming isn't a sport, it's a way to keep from drowning."
Yes. Yes. My coach, I'm not sure would agree with that. But I don't disagree at a base level that that's exactly the truth.
One last job you had that I wanna touch on because it's very unique, a scientific content writer. Like, I would expect to see that as, like, someone's first job out of university working, say, for a museum, like, doing, like, blog posts or things like that, so, what were you doing there?
And how on earth did it happen? So
Yeah.
you'll laugh. It actually was born of lifeguarding, babysitting, and my degrees in college. So that happened my freshman summer to sophomore year of college. I had stayed over that summer and was working as a lifeguard. As a lifeguard at that pool, I met a family who I then started to babysit for,
Mhm.
and then discovered in the course of babysitting that she ran a company called Spectra Alliance, which was all about spectrometers and ensuring that you were using the scientific tools and components correctly. But they needed help with marketing and the ability to tell the story of what would generally be very boring scientific information in a way that would be compelling, engaging, and allow people to understand how to use the products and want to engage with them more. Which, when you asked me that question in prep, it completely, because I'd 100% forgotten about it. It actually was my first job in marketing, and I had
There
no
we go.
time besides being a fireworks cashier and trying to get people to buy more. But it that was 100% what my first marketing job was, and it evolved out of just like every job all of us have now, relationships and prior experiences that kind of built and opened doors and windows behind it.
And I gotta give a shout out to the Marvel movies. That's
Oh,
the only place I've ever heard spectrometer before, and I thought it was just a plot device.
Tony Stark and I'm telling ya, we could spend an entire podcast and maybe an entire series of them talking about Marvel. It is a deep and abiding passion. I could not be more excited about the lineup for this year.
Oh, you've got me going now. If you've seen some of my other episodes, I see I think they've fallen off quite a bit. I think they've managed to keep it together with Spider-Man to a certain degree. I'm not looking forward to Doomsday, or whatever it is.
Yeah.
I'm not looking forward to it because I start with all of the characters they're bringing back and cross universe stuff. It's starting to remind me of Deadpool and Wolverine, which is my least favorite of the three. I thought it was just, if I can use the term, an orgy of cameos and
Orgy is
nostalgia,
the correct word.
which was not stitched together with any sort of plot whatsoever. Like, it was nice. It was a good watch. I don't regret paying to see it, but I was like, Deadpool 1 had way more of a plot. That's my favorite. But yeah, we could go off on that for I'm looking forward to Spider-Man. I will say that. I'm
So to close that one out, because we could talk that for a while. We certainly
okay.
could debate it. I don't disagree with you that it's we're going to call it, it got overexcited and it overreached, much like marketing companies and brands and agencies. You get excited about something that's working and then you overdo it and you don't edit yourself accordingly. And so too much content was coming out. We lost
Yes.
plot. We moved to the side and no one could keep up. Honestly, no one, especially anyone who was working. But I feel like they have kept the thread. We're going to just keep using this one. Kept the thread on Spider-Man. I agree with you. I believe very sincerely that that first core Marvel line with Tony Stark and Captain America was
Yeah, phase 1
phenomenal,
was great.
absolutely phenomenal, and bring it through. I am excited for Doomsday only because my favorite people are back, but I am also terrified because I don't think I'm going to handle Tony Stark being a bad guy very well. And I don't believe that that is a spoiler because most people should know that if you're watching Marvel movies.
See, I okay, you bring up an interesting point because the debate is, will he actually be Victor Von Doom and no one ever sees him without his mask on? Or will he be, because there is an alternate universe
And
where Tony Stark becomes Doctor Doom. So if they do it that way, we'll
which
have
verse are we in? That's going to be the question.
it's yeah, I wasn't crazy about Fantastic Four. Big fan of the Daredevil series,
Okay.
like that was, but I will close it by saying by asking you this question. Who do you think Sadie Sink is playing? Because out of everything of that upcoming Spider-Man movie, that is the one character that they have kept lock and key.
So I have no idea. I have speculated on this wildly and talked this with my oldest ad nauseum because she is the wildest Sadie Sink fan. In fact, we're going to see her on Broadway in London shortly. Um, Most of the time, I think, and let's be totally clear, Sadie Sink will be awesome in whatever role that she is in. I just want Stranger Things to come back again. As a child of the '80s, I rather desperately bought into the last round of conspiracy theory and really needed there to be more. So I am still just resettling myself that it's not quite there. But new project in the Burrows that just came out shortly, so I'm pretty excited about that. Same producers with the Duffers, so we'll see how it goes.
So you don't want to make a call on what you think she's playing.
I don't because Uh, I honestly am not sure. I've gone back and forth. Do you have a call? Are you pretty set on what you think it'll be?
Young Jean Grey.
I don't know if
Eh,
I can handle that
Young
because I
Jean
feel like that plot went sideways too.
I think young Jean Grey, because they've been planting mutant seeds going back to Ms. Marvel, and I think this is where they kick it into high gear, and I think the Punisher is protecting her because Damage Control is going after her, and that's another thing they've introduced was the Department of Damage Control has been
They
hunting
did.
like you saw it in, oh god, Wonder Man. Like, they really double down on it, so you shouldn't be surprised if they show up again, so and in the fact in the trailer, the only time you see her is you see her feet. That's it. Like, they really hide her.
You could be right. Now I'm intrigued by this, and I would be perfectly happy with a reinvention of Jean Grey because that plot line and bring to life didn't work as well for me as I was hoping. Again, we
No.
could talk about this for days.
We're digressing, but we did sort of get into this because you were talking about being a scientific content writer in university. So what brought you to Washington University in St. Louis?
Scholarships. So born and raised in St. Louis, had absolutely no intention of staying. I was headed to Georgetown, already kind of in an accelerated accepted into med school program. That's where I wanted to go. And WashU came through at the last minute with an academic scholarship, which is not an easy thing to get. And when your family sits in that space that looks like they can pay more than they can actually pay, it's not a small thing or a trivial thing that you can turn down. And let's be totally clear, Washington University in St. Louis is an outstanding university, and they offered the opportunity for me to do a dual degree program with an assorted variety of minors. And it turned out to be one of the best decisions I ever made.
Were you swimming when you were in university as well?
I was. I swam up through sophomore year until both of my shoulders blew out and required surgery. It is an extraordinary commitment and an amazing opportunity as you're navigating such a major life stage within that space.
At that point, though, just to touch on it a little bit, because I've had friends that have gone all the way too in swimming. Say, for example, that your shoulders had not blown out. Were you aiming for the Olympics? Because when you're swimming at the university level, the collegiate level, that's the next step. Like there is nothing higher than that than the Olympics.
Look, as a little kid swimmer, it was all about, "We're going to the Olympics, this is gonna be amazing." The reality of being 5'2" and also wanting to do dual degree and everything else did a lovely level set at age 16,
Mm.
uh, to be like, "Hey, I love swimming. I love what it's done for me. I'd like to keep swimming through college, but I do not have aspirations, nor am I good enough to be competing at that particular level." I was probably 1 or 2 right below there. I was on a national stage, but not nearly where I would need to be in that kind of Olympic realm. That said, I had any number of swim meets where I got to swim with Katie Ledecky, Janet Evans, everybody else, which to this day, still one of my favorite things.
So you had that conversation with yourself when you were 16. Had your shoulders not blown out, how much further do you think you would have done at university? Like, would you have done it through your junior and senior year as well, or
I
was
think so.
you would okay, you would have kept going, okay.
I would have done it through undergrad, and then that would have been the hang up. That's probably I have very little regrets in life. There are very few things that I would do differently in hindsight because you learn from all of them. But the one I wish I could have been a little bit more on my terms was when and how I stopped swimming. And unfortunately, with the state of where my shoulders were at, I was kind of I won't say I was forced because I still had to make that decision. It definitely wasn't, how are we feeling about this? And weigh the pros and cons. It was, you can't swim anymore because you won't be able to pick up your kids one day and you need surgery on both. So that was one thing that I wish could have been a little more on my terms. But I think all of us have any number of things we wish could be a little bit more on our terms, and you just learn from it.
Just to touch on it one last point, do you remember that I guess you could sort of say the very first day that you were fully healed up, where you theoretically probably could get back into the pool and swim, where all of a sudden you were getting up at, I guess, a reasonable time that the rest of the world gets up at? Like, did you remember, like, did it take you a while to get adjusted to that
Yeah.
new routine? Because friends of mine who were swimming elite swimmers, they had that problem too when they stopped.
Yes, actually, it was, ridiculously challenging because the healing time for both shoulders was terrible, and then the PT associated with that. So we're talking year plus once everything was back
Mm.
to a point where you'd start swimming. By then, you'd kind of adjusted to your life, and it was a lot harder for me because of the shoulder surgeries, I couldn't switch to running or some easy-based physical activity that would have made so I actually ended up gaining more weight and getting out of shape in a way that wasn't fantastic. Um, or at least it wasn't from my point of view. Others would tell you it probably wasn't that bad, but it was from my point of view, given my standard previously. So it was a rough transition. You're exactly right. When you're used to doing something at that level for so long, it's a bit of a shock when you're not doing it in that manner anymore, and you have to not just fill the time, but you have to reset habits, based on what you're trying to achieve.
And you also bring up a point about diet as well. Like you're eating, God, how many calories you're eating per day and burning them off, and then all of a sudden you have to recalibrate your diet where it's like, yeah, you're not doing that. You're not burning thousands and thousands
You
daily.
are so right. I mean, high school was ridiculous between that, like you said, the AM practice, evening practice, and everything else. Like you would eat at every point of the day when you were not swimming because otherwise you weren't going to make it. You get out of the pool and you'd be like, I need a cheeseburger. I need whatever.
Yes.
Well, something terrible for me that's just going to fill the hole of calories. And you could eat like that as a teenager and not have a problem. It is not at all what you can do once you come out of the college gate.
Okay, so you graduate, you've put a pin in your swimming career, and Gamble comes calling. And you start off as you start off as associate ma look, a lot of people out of graduation would love to be working at P&G. So you start off as associate manager, consumer and marketing knowledge, North America. Again, you've got like the longest titles I've ever had. North America,
Did
feminine protection. So let's start first with how did you find the job? And also, did you relocate to Cincinnati as well?
relocate to Cincinnati. How did I find the job? So I have told this story a couple times. This particular one either gets a "that's not fair" or a "wow, you were the luckiest person on the planet" type of reaction. So my then fiance, now still husband, and I already had jobs in Chicago. It was our fall. It was our the middle. It was the winter of senior year, and we already had jobs lined up in Chicago. We knew what we were going to do. We were getting married after college. You name it. There was a whole plan, and P&G was in the bottom of the business school giving out Tide samples. And my then fiance, now husband, was in a class. So I was bored and I needed to do laundry. So I requested a Tide sample and they wouldn't give me one unless I dropped my resume. To which we almost got into a tug of war over a Tide sample because I felt like this was a very unfair way to do business at the time, especially from an awareness booster standpoint. And very, very long story short, I dropped my resume to get a Tide sample and got a proactive phone call back from the two hiring managers who were looking for this particular area of the company, who said, "Hey, you have one of the most interesting resumes we've ever seen with the dual degrees across art and science. And we have this job that kind of sits at the intersection of that. Would you be interested?" And I said, "No, actually, I would not. I already have a job." To which they very nicely coached me on, "Hey, you don't really say no to P&G. You should have a
Yes.
conversation. Let me help you with this particular life choice." So again, we eventually got into a conversation. I adored the conversation. They were smart, kind, quick, very fun people. And I ultimately made the decision to drop the other job and take this particular opportunity. And they also helped my then fiance, now husband, find a job that worked for him too until a finance role opened up at P&G. So they created a fairly loyal employee from the gates. That doesn't happen anymore, by the way, but a fairly loyal employee from the gates, which then resulted in 18 years at Procter Gamble. So Tide samples, honestly, I'm telling you, that's where it started.
Okay, so this was a recruitment drive. It's not like they were on campus trying to get students with, like, samples to buy Tide.
Nope, it was a recruitment drive at the business school for all of the people who had been more prepared and actually signed up to get a job at P&G, who knew how big P&G was and that it was probably the job you wanted to get. I didn't care. I needed to do laundry.
Isn't it crazy the way these things work out? Like, you get attracted to this just because you needed to do laundry, your whole life's already you guys have already got that life plan in place,
Well
and then
done.
you're surrounded by people who really want that job, and you're kind of like, "Maybe, maybe," and here they are courting you.
It ended up being a fantastic decision. Yes, we relocated to Cincinnati. In fact, we did the what many people do if you're trying to cram all that in. We graduated, um, got married, went on a honeymoon, moved, and started first day of work, and then, strangely enough, bought land to build a house within 6 weeks. When I tell you that swimming allowed me to create discipline and a sense of humor on you can do whatever you have to do, you will figure out how to get it done. That's pretty much what I'm talking about.
You should be running a master class on time management.
Yeah,
It's
I probably. Although I will tell you, I've hit the life stage where it doesn't matter how good you are at time management, you are never going to get it all done.
what was it Mike Tyson said? "Everyone's got a plan till they get punched in the face."
Yes,
It's
actually, I have a funny Mike Tyson story, not for this podcast, but in the future sometime.
if you wanna come back and we just do a Marvel Mike Tyson podcast, I can make it happen. I is it tied into P&G? Like, please tell me you guys were trying to get him to hawk Tide, because
Uh,
that would be like, that is one of the biggest mismatches that would drive so much attention. Like, no one would
Oh,
look away
it
from that ad.
really would. I can't even imagine. I mean, look, P&G was amazing for a lot of things. They taught me a lot of things, and it was definitely time to navigate to what was next. But that's one particular collaboration I would be probably a little surprised to see, but maybe not. You never know.
Okay, so let's start first with that very first role that you had at P&G before we go through some of the other ones. Day 1, what was it like? What were they getting you to do? And, I mean, how much did you have to learn? Were you drinking from a fire hose?
Yes to the drinking from the fire hose. No idea what I was getting into, probably more information than you want. So I was working in feminine protection, so
Mhm.
tampons, pads, the rest of it. It was never where I expected I would start for my very first role. And I remember I walked into my first meeting and it was with the R&D lead and they had all the research. So they were working through all the lab stuff of how everything works and you can use your imagination on how everything happens in that regard. To which, again, swimming came to my rescue because as a swimmer, there's very few things left to the imagination. Like there's just, I
Mm,
mean,
it's very
bodies are
true, yeah.
bodies, body functions are body functions. You just don't have the same level of that freaks me out or I'm uncomfortable with that. So you just kind of stepped in and you got to work and you figured out what you were going to do. And my focus really was on who was the right consumer, who was the right shopper, how do you tell the story to enable the best possible marketing, how do you figure out the data to ensure that the forecast is right so that we launch it correctly? That was a lifetime ago. But it was an intriguing job for sure, and it was 100% not what I expected to be doing. I mean, I was headed to med school, so it was like a 180.
Okay, so let's were you still thinking about med school at that point? Like, did you still have an eye on that and say, "Okay, I'll do this for a bit, and once hubby and I are settled, then I'll
Up
pivot into med
until
school?"
September of senior year in college, I still had a do I want to do this because I had taken the MCAT and the LSAT to rule them out. Don't get me started, different conversation. Um, and I made the decision that I wanted to work for a while for a variety of reasons. And so I let it go. But at that point, I still had hey, I can work for a few years and then decide to go back at some point when and if the industry calms down a little bit and it's still what I want to do. But, like most people, once you start making money, it's really hard to turn down making money and go back to terrible hours and a slightly different landscape.
Okay, I wanna ask you a quick question about the MCATs and the LSATs. Which one did you find more difficult? And I'm gonna preface that by saying I've had friends do both. Everyone who deserved to go to med school seemed to, I don't wanna say breeze through the MCATs, but they just treated it like another test, and that's what they said after. Whereas the LSATs, even some of my most brilliant friends who did well in the LSATs came out of that going, "We wouldn't wish that on our enemy."
I loved the LSAT.
So it was the other way around then.
But I'll tell you why. I loved the LSAT because it was a no low pressure situation for me. I was ruling out being a lawyer. I come from a long extended family of very successful lawyers. And all of them were like, you should take the LSAT. So you have the option, you can go do this. And so I was taking it to rule out going to law school, which meant I didn't study and I didn't put pressure on myself, which meant I did really well, which is what if all of us could relax a little bit and just let our brains think through logic of things and not pressure ourselves the same way we probably all would have the opportunity to do. So that backfired tremendously because once they found out how I did, they were like, you should be going to this school and this school and this school. But we navigated past that.
You navigated past that, but your career continued to grow at Procter& Gamble. So one of the next steps was senior manager of market strategy and shopper insights innovation leader. Again, really long ones. North American household needs. It's so strange. All the titles of P&G are this long, but then it's like detergent, just called Tide.
Yeah, you work across pretty large portfolios and they have because they are such a big company, they have the privilege of having a lot of different roles to accomplish different things. Yeah, that was actually one of my favorite jobs. I got to switch from being focused on consumer product usage and all the data that went behind that to working with retailer facing and go to market and more focus on shopper and in store. And it offered me the opportunity to start to play in a space where we were truly reinventing store experiences. And that again, in hindsight, is probably more to my marketing creative arena where you get to define what the future should look like and you make people have a more emotional response.
I'm wondering, when you got to Procter& Gamble, did you find that or did you believe that you would have to dig down to find the motivation? Just because, I mean this with no disrespect to P&G, you think of some of the other companies you could have worked at, like think Red Bull or Nike, usually a lot of the sportswear companies, you see a lot of the things that they do in the marketing space. They'll bring athletes in and so forth. And it's vastly different and arguably more exciting than, say, dealing with
Totally agree.
CPG items.
Yeah. Um, if I had started with, I want to be the best advertiser, marketer in the industry, yes, I would have had that reaction 100% and probably shot to a different place or started on the agency side or done something different with a more traditional career path for that type of marketing professional. I actually started in strategy and insights and analytics. So I was marketing adjacent and sales adjacent. So it didn't bother me as much relative to what they were or were not doing beyond the wow, that was a very functional commercial. That started to come about 8 to 10 years in as I got closer and closer to being marketing affiliated and sales affiliated and really using those marketing chops. What P&G is, they're often called the best marketing lead in the industry, and they are phenomenal when it comes to brand building and results. But what they really are is the playbook for how to build billion-dollar brands and how to be wildly successful at all of the components that run business and help you understand how brands grow and operate. And the vast majority of marketing players and sales players out there at some point in their lives cross paths with P&G. They're populating the rest of the marketing and sales world relative to the resume builders that then help people go to the Nikes and the Red Bulls to go what they then do in that capacity.
Do you think your swimming career helped you get excited about things like sales and marketing, just when it was combined within that specific role? Putting it out there, when you're a swimmer, it's not like typical stick and ball sports where it's like 2 teams, 1 will win and 1 will lose. In swimming, it's like you've got what? At least 8 people, and sometimes there's a couple of heats because you just can't fill everyone in the pool at once. Where if you're first, you earn that spot. There could be somewhere between 7 to 10 people behind you. And likewise in, say, for example, the grocery world or the CPG world, it's not like it's tied and pick your other brand, Sun Life, on the shelf. There are a number of other brands, not to mention even the store brands that are coming in and trying to undercut you on price.
So this is a super interesting corollary. Again, we should be talking more often because you're helping me dissect things that I haven't thought about in years.
I'm gonna be the industry's therapist. That's what
As
it
you
is,
should be,
unofficial.
and then I'll come join you when I decide I can't handle being in the marketing area anymore because it's exhausting. But I think yes, and you were very kind in saying it's like 2 heats. It's like 15 to 20 sometimes, like the amount of time.
At your level, I know there are multiple heats. At my level, when I did it, it was lucky if we could fill the pool with 2 heats.
I understand that completely. So, uh, I think it does. I think, but less about the sheer consideration set moving into who's the winner, who's not. Because the interesting thing about swimming is it is a fascinating combination of individual and team sport, but individual first.
Mhm.
So you are racing against yourself. You are the only person who can put in the work, who knows if you put in the work. You're the only person who is responsible at the end of the day for, did you get your hand to the wall faster? Did you work on the things that you needed to work on? And did you put the commitment in to make it happen? And frankly, sometimes did you get lucky? Was it a good pool? Was the
Mm,
weather right? Did everything else fall into place? Um, and then you get this magical thing called a relay, where you get
mm.
them with hopefully people who are also really good friends, which is the just trifecta of unbelievable experiences to happen when you all have worked really hard. You're going after a shared goal and you get to do it with people that you truly like. Again, let's just put the parallel with getting to lead really great teams. But the relays is where it's suddenly about being a team again, and inevitably, you always swam your fastest times on a relay because working to achieve a common goal that mattered to other people is a pretty good motivator besides just pushing yourself to go faster. But I think it's that combination of individual pursuit and accountability and discipline with an opportunity to lead and empower with cross collaborative teams that really set the swimming piece up.
And if you look at swimming and you apply that to a micro level, there was something that I had said once on LinkedIn. I compared Michael Phelps to a salesperson, whereas in sales, you're supposed to help lift your teammates up, but at the same time, you're trying to beat them. And I took his medals and I put them into 2 groups. I said, "Here are his individual gold medals, and here are his relay medals," like you mentioned. On one side, he is out there kicking his teammates' asses, taking medals away from
Mhm.
them. And then on the other side, he's trying to help them and lift them up.
Yes.
So
Yes.
it's co-opetition, like that's the big thing about swimming that no one you can learn a lot from swimming.
I agree. My best friend in, high school up through the first part of college was my fiercest competition in the exact same races, and we went back and forth every single time. And the best part about swimming that I found is, unless something's very different for somebody else, generally your fiercest competition was also the person you admired most and you got along with the most because you were similar in how you approached everything and how you thought about what needed to be true.
See, it's good that you had a healthy approach to competition because there are people out there that no, it's true because people out there who would not pay attention to the details that you're saying and analyze to say, okay, they beat me. Why did they beat me? Because some people will make excuses. They'll say, oh, this
Oh,
happened, that happened, so forth, rather than going, they just wanted it more. Like not to oversimplify it.
or I
And
beat myself because I didn't put in the time. Yeah, I agree.
yeah. Okay, so let's close off your career at Procter and Gamble. Your last role at the company, you were this again, very long one, senior director, strategy and insights leader, omni innovation and emerging retail shopping.
Yeah. Let's break that down to what it actually was. So,
Okay.
my job was essentially focused on commerce and omni innovation. So it was a lot, there's a number of roles and permutations that evolved because it was coinciding with the time that digital was really rising and retail media was really rising and conversational commerce and Amazon and all of these other things were happening. So there were what I would call emerging business models and touch points and very new things in the industry. Um, Very similar to what's happening right now in terms of pendulum swings and other things that are happening. This particular job was all about previous more traditional roles models are not working, go fix it. And we've never done this before, go help us figure it out. And most of my roles throughout my career, by either self prophecy or design, have all landed usually in that particular bucket of go make it work and navigate the chaos. So this particular one was all about commerce and omni innovation. So it was everything coming in terms of how do you work with the retailers? How do you more effectively sell? How do you figure out the shopper story? How do you define what comes next in an industry that's being turned on its head? Which is kind of funny to say, given everything that's happening with AI right now and all the other pieces. But it was a pretty challenging but exciting time to be trying to figure out. And ultimately, when you sit in those roles, your job is to tell people what it will cost and how they can accomplish doing something different. And that's not always successful. Sometimes it's a lot like pushing an extraordinary amount of water uphill. So kind of where it lands.
Or swimming against the tide. Put it
Or
that way.
swimming.
Swimmer.
God,
Swimming
they keep
against the tide.
you're gonna have to name this entire podcast something related to water and swimming.
Tell you what, I'll put a pin in it right now because this is something I struggle with is getting like the right title right for the tile, like for the YouTube tile. So swimming against the tide. That's what I'll nice
Uh,
reminder to myself.
I love it.
All right. We're going to use that. So, okay. So after the stellar career at Procter and Gamble, what enticed you to take up a role to move to Bayer? Because you're not just moving over to Bayer. You're actually the family's picking up, and at this point, you're leaving Cincinnati and going to New Jersey.
Yeah. So I was not going back into corporate. It had been 18 years of run the race to get to P&G by accident, and then 18 years at P&G. And that included two kids in there and, building a life and everything that went with it. I was ready to do something very different. Corporate can be exhausting. It is an acquired taste for an extended period of time and I was going to take a break. I was going to start writing. I was going to do many different things. I also, on some level, had become somewhat bored. I'd become a certified Pilates reformer instructor. I had started writing arts reviews at a local to an international level. So clearly, I was in a place where I needed to do something different. And a friend of a friend reached out because anytime I'm in between trying to figure out what's next, my favorite thing to do is to talk to people and ask them about their stories, not what they think I should do or what's available, but ask them their stories because as they tell me their stories, I can figure out for myself what's resonating and what am I like, oh no, I don't want to do that. So it allows me to chart my own path while also learning more about them. But she asked if I wanted to talk to someone who was driving a massive transformation within the Bayer Consumer Health Organization. And I said, sure, never turned down a conversation. And again, very long story short, they connected me with the CMO at the time, who is still to this day probably one of my favorite people I've ever worked for, who going back to the first grade and fourth grade teacher, saw me for who I was and the unique skill sets that I can and would bring and said, hey, you're a bit of a unicorn. Here's a couple things I want you to go fix, and then you tell me what we need to do. And the opportunity to have free reign to figure out what should we do and how do we transform an entire marketing organization, and to do that with support and creativity wasn't something I could turn down. And to this day, probably my favorite job.
Okay, but this initial job at Bayer, the director of digital marketing, only lasted what, 2, 3 months before you moved into a
We
chief of
changed
staff
the
position?
title, and we made it chief of staff. Yeah. So they
Okay,
hired
so your
me.
responsibilities stayed the same then, I guess.
Not really. So the first 2 was fix these 2 things that we needed fixed.
You did all
And
that in 2 months?
very well, more like still anchored more in my insights and analytics past versus my marketing and sales future.
Okay.
And that, CMO conversation said, "We're not using you correctly. So let's go do the right thing, and it will encompass those things we still need you to guide and help that group do, but I need you to go do this."
Gotcha. Okay, no, that's good to know. So you landed Bayer. Was pharmaceuticals, putting aside a lot of the, I guess you could sort of say, actually, no, in the United States, there aren't a lot of regulations when it comes to advertising. You guys are pretty free with that. Was it a bit of a culture shock for you? Like, did you find that there were certain things from your P&G days working on various, like, consumer-facing brands that didn't work at Bayer? You maybe a bit of a readjustment period for yourself?
Yes and no. So the most interesting thing about Bayer at the time is that they had 3 divisions. So they had an agricultural division, they had a consumer health division, and then they had a pharmaceutical division. And I worked within the consumer health division, which was primarily CPG, P&G aligned brands.
Okay, so a lot of
Um,
the stuff you can get on the shelf, over the
Yes,
counter. Okay.
everything OTC in that capacity. We had partnerships with ag and we had partnerships with pharmaceuticals as well, but the restraints that are on both of those market from a scientific and FDA regulation is not the same as the CPG space.
Mm.
So I was able to play in a very similar arena in some cases, areas that probably ended up being direct competitors in the future. So I was able to use an extraordinary amount of what I had learned at P&G to enable what I was doing at Bayer. Uh, but yes, on a side note, again for a different podcast, I believe that pharmaceuticals are ripe for a completely different way of going after marketing.
Did you by any chance bring those insights or that belief to your next role there as VP of Omni Marketing?
So wouldn't I have loved to? That one was still sitting within the consumer health space and was truly focused on we've got to figure out this retail media thing. We've got to figure out how to drive
Mm.
end to end go to market plans that lead from brand building all the way down to retail and back. And make sure that we're doing it in a way that is efficient and effective. And I made the mistake that anyone would potentially make in this particular space. When I took that role, I said, if we do this correctly, you won't need this role because we will have integrated it fully into the business. And
Mm.
that would be the gold standard of what we were able to achieve. And sure enough, we no longer needed that role. So it was time to once again ask myself after that point, what do I want to do next? And again, I didn't have any intention of going back into corporate America. It didn't last very long either. So we'll see if the next time around sticks.
Because you moved on to become the EVP, head of Advantage Unified Commerce, e-tail, Entail? I got it
Yeah,
wrong.
no, so it's a little confusing, right? Because there's
Yeah,
a million of them there. So, I the day that I left Bayer, I received a phone call from the CEO at Advantage Solutions, which is the parent company,
okay.
who I had met on occasion at dinners and industry events, and we had connected over St. Louis. So again, the moral of the story here is make sure you share your stories, and life stepping stones are all about how you drive connections. Same way with the lifeguarding, right?
But yes.
And he called me up and he basically was like, I don't know what you're looking to do next. I'm here to help regardless, but I have this thing. I have this agency called Advantage Unified Commerce that used to be 5 agencies that we are looking to kind of transform and move forward. And I think you would be perfect. And once again, you get to run it, lead it, free reign to go be you. And use the superpowers that you started to curate, whether they're actual superpowers or they've just become the thing that I've done so often that now I do them. But that was where it started. And 6 to 9 months later, they asked me to take on what was the legacy AMP agency, which was also 5 agencies. And define how we would integrate them into a seamless, fully functional one agency operating and narrative model. And that's what I spent my second year at Advantage doing, is defining and delivering an agency. And it has been a ride.
Okay, so let's touch on something there. It's funny that you keep saying you were trying to get out of corporate and you went agency side because I've got friends and peers who started off in agency and they either couldn't wait to go corporate side or they've been trying to go corporate side. So, being as you're someone who did it in reverse, I guess it would kind of be counterculture to the way the world works, or at least the way this industry works. What was it
100.
like? Was it a bit of a shock to you? Like, was it a little bit more casual? I imagine. Like, was there an adjustment period?
Still adjusting. I
Okay.
I've half joking, half not joking, say I'm gonna write a book about it. Because when I first announced that I was gonna take the job, generally speaking, everyone who knew me well had 2 reactions, both from the same person. So the first one was, "Oh my gosh, you're going to the dark side." The second one, "You're gonna be amazing." Now, this is usually just a really good group of people and friends and villages who support you regardless of whatever crazy decision you're making. Um, but it was more insightful than that. They were like, "You have constantly spent your career working on things that are broken, need to be fixed, have never been done before, need to be completely transformed, and you don't like to get bored." And in hindsight, after 22 plus years on the client side, in every single role sat in a functionally agnostic, figure it out space, agency literally is the actual definition of that space. Every single day, every single part of every single day is guaranteed that you will not get bored. There is always a different permutation of a challenge, opportunity, engagement, client, you name it, with endless opportunities to be creative, flex operational muscles, and more importantly, work with a really scrappy group of people who are less focused on here's the way we've always done it and here's the politics of this to how do we get this done and how do we get it done well.
Nice. So let's go back to day one of you going to agency life versus today. How much have you changed as a manager, and how much has the business changed under your leadership?
Well, that's probably the first one's probably a good question for the people who know me best or report to me. I don't believe as a leader that I have changed all of that much in terms of my kind of core elements. I tend to be very candid. Here's who I am, and let's flex those muscles and continue to be the best parts of who you are. I think what has changed as a leader is the level of responsibility, accountability, and the need to make some very challenging decisions. One of the things on the agency side that just as an empathetic person is very challenging is when you lose business, you have to correspondingly reconcile your P&L.
Yeah, that is
And
tough.
it is probably one of my least favorite parts of the business model. A portion of my brain is still working on how do you create a different type of agency model that doesn't rely on that type of give and take and allows for more consistent flex and growth. But I haven't solved it yet, so that's work to be done. But that space requires you to get to a level of practical, empathetic leadership that strikes that balance. You have to make the tough decisions. You're responsible, and you have to do it with empathy, and you have to do it with vision and solving, um, and you have to do it with accountability. But that's a level of responsibility that I just didn't have in previous roles. I led big teams. I had billion-dollar brands, you name it. But when you're responsible for 400 plus people, their livelihoods, and trying to move the needle in an industry that is really challenging at the moment, it's a lot. It's a bigger weight to carry. So you find that you tend to be more intentional about how you navigate those waters.
Christy, let's talk about your time at Bayer and P&G for a second. Something I wanted to pick out is that you have managed to secure a number of successive promotions. So, if anyone here is thinking about or they're going for that next role at their company, they really like where they work, but they want to move up a level, what advice would you give them?
Yeah, it's probably a few different things. Beyond just hope that you're in the right place at the right time doing the right job, because a
Mm.
lot of promotions is luck. It doesn't feel like it. It feels like you have to fight for it a lot, but it is a lot of luck, certainly in today's current market. But I'll say focus on the things you can control, and the things you can control are executing with excellence. It's showing up with a curiosity mindset and finding solutions. I will tell you one of the biggest differences for me, for the people who really stand out for me, are the ones who proactively come with ideas to solve, and they take
Mm.
accountability for how we're going to make things better. And then I would say the last two is be flexible and open minded. You honestly never know where the next opportunity is going to come from. It very rarely looks like what you expected it to. And more often than not, the thing that you're most scared of or wasn't the thing you were looking for turns out to be the very best decision because turns out it's going to stretch you the most, and be the one that puts you into a better frame of what's possible for you. And then what we've said the entire time, which is have a sense of humor because there's going to be any number of times where you feel like you deserve something or it was later or longer or different or something was unfair, and in the grand scheme of life there's a lot of potentially unfair. There's also a lot of fair, and it comes down to your attitude and the ability to keep moving.
You cannot survive media and marketing without a sense of humor. That should be you don't even have to put it on your resume, not that anyone does, but it should just be assumed that you've got that
Totally
if you wanna
agree.
All right, Christy, this has been a fantastic chat. Are you ready for rapid fire questions?
I love rapid fire questions.
All right, we're gonna bring it home with first question, the body of work that you are most proud of.
I'm going to cheat because most of these are going to have two answers just because I intersection of art and science. So rapid fire: the pet store of the future at Procter and Gamble, and the Be Bold marketing platform at Bayer Consumer Health, at least to date.
Your favorite movie?
The '80s child in me says The Goonies. The adult in me says The Martian.
Ooh, I'm just thinking about that water slide in the Goonies. They built that set. That was not
Absolute best.
CGI'd. That
Absolute
was
best.
envy of every child's childhood.
It was
That
the
was an au
goal. It was the goal. You were going to end up on a pirate ship. You were going to find all the treasure, and then you were going to do whatever you wanted to do.
exactly. Staying on the topic of movies, if Hollywood were to make a movie based on your life story, who would you want to play you?
Only because I adore her and I think she's extraordinary in on and off the screen. Meryl Streep. I mean, bring me Mamma Mia all day long. Not to say that I can sing, but I adore her. My kids would say Anne Hathaway. Don't ask. I don't see it, but they've decided that's a thing.
I think Hannah Hathaway is great,
Oh, I
and
think she's wonderful. I totally agree. But they are on this kick that they think that's who I look like if I could only. But yeah, we're just gonna go with Meryl Streep.
all right. My follow-up, if Hollywood were to make this movie, what would you call it?
To throw it back to one of my favorite shows of all time, it would be What's Next? It's always a question of what's next? What do we do next? We're just going to go with President Bartlett and bring back West Wing all over again.
There we go. Now you've got me thinking about do you remember the debate episode in the final season where it was like commercial
100%.
'cause that's
100%.
one of the best campaigns ever. Commercial free with the exception of Amex jumping in, filmed live. Whew, they did that
Amazing.
very well. Yeah.
Amazing. Yes, we, again, different podcasts could talk that forever.
And I like that they humanize every side of the political spectrum. Like they
They
did
did.
like Alan Alda was the perfect Republican.
Oh my gosh. Again, if we could only have Alan Alda right now. And Ainsley. I could take Ainsley back too. Delightful.
You ever hear his story about how he was courted to run for office?
I did, and I'm really sad it didn't happen. It feels a little bit like what's happening with Stephen Colbert right now, actually.
Well,
So
I like that he said no to it because he's like, "I don't wanna do it," but they kept saying, "But you can win," and he's like, "But I'm not the right person." Like, winning and putting the right person in power are 2 different things. But look, not to digress because this is rapid fire questions. Your favorite your favorite book?
I have so many. I am a voracious reader. I'm just gonna stick it with probably Atlas Shrugged, but currently reading Carl the Dungeon Crawler because that series has sucked me in completely. And again, if you liked Marvel and all the rest of it, you might find that you like the insanity of this one too.
Alright, okay, no, I'll take you up on that. Your favorite song?
In the Air Tonight, Phil Collins. There's no better song for dropping the beat and waiting a ridiculously long period of time to do it and making everyone wait with you successfully. It's phenomenal.
The best advice you have ever received?
Interesting enough, so much good advice. I was struggling with a particular manager at the time, and the advice was, "You are not in competition with your boss. You
Mm.
are not rated against each other. It is not about that. Stop trying to fight against the differences and instead figure out how you can move the agenda and the solutions forward in a way that empowers and enables you both, because when they look good, you look good."
If you could go back in time and give your younger self advice, what would you say?
The one we keep saying, right, which is keep your sense of humor.
Mm.
I think we talked about a few of them already. You know, that it's never going to look the way you drew it up. Uh, Run towards what scares you. But I think the most important one, and it's probably a little cliched at this point, but the one I would really reinforce is stay true to who you are. It is the only capital you have. Obviously, if you have things to work on, go work on the things that need worked on. But the things that make you great are the things that you should lean into and continue to curate and cultivate and make sure that you help other people find their authentic selves as well.
My signature closing question: if you weren't media and marketing, what would you be doing and why?
At the moment, I'd be writing children's book or spending a great deal of time becoming a master gardener, and doing horticulture because it soothes my soul. But mostly spending time with my family.
And we're going to end things right here. Christy, thank you so much for stopping by.
Thank you so much, Victor. It was a wonderful conversation.